Good morning, good afternoon, good evening internet, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Economical Rides. Hi there. Back in November 2021, I did a 3,500 kilometre review of Buddy, my Royal Enfield Meteor 350. At the time I'd had Buddy for about 5 months, and I'll link to that video in the end card of this video. But that was a long time ago. So now I've had Buddy for just over 2 years. We've just had the 24-month service done, which is why the panniers aren't currently fitted, by the way. I still haven't got around to putting them back on. But I thought we'd revisit the Meteor now after 2 years and let you know how it's getting on and how I feel about it after a really long period of ownership. Well, first of all, I'm still loving this engine, this J Series 350 engine. It's beautifully smooth, it has plenty of low down grunt, and it just really encourages early upshifts and really relaxed, easy cruising. The engine and the gearbox on this bike are perfectly matched, the gear ratios are spot on, and it really is easy to get up quickly through the gears and get into a nice relaxed cruise. Back in that video in 2021, I was amazed by the fuel economy of this bike, and again that's one of the major things that I love about this bike, is the fact that I don't have to go and fill it up very often. I really do hate filling bikes up at petrol stations, not because of the financial aspect, I just think it's a hassle. So it's great to be able to go out on this bike multiple times and not even have to think about filling it up. I can easily do 400 kilometers on a tank full. Sometimes I've even done 500 if I've pushed it a bit. So yeah, range is never an issue with this bike, and you don't spend too long buying petrol. After 2 years, I can confirm that the fit and finish on this bike is excellent, as I suspected at the time in 2021 when I first got the bike. The bike is now 2 years old. It's done 9,000 kilometers, so I think that's about 5,500 miles. And it looks, to all intents and purposes, absolutely brand new. Here you can see the fasteners are still shiny. Things like the rim tape, which you might think could suffer over time, still looks absolutely spot on. So I would say these bikes are not just made to sell, made to look nice in the showroom. These finishes do actually last very well, and the bike's very easy to clean as well, particularly the black engine finish on this bike. And I've had this bike absolutely filthy dirty multiple times, and just hose it down, dry it off, it comes up looking like new. So yeah, definitely durability, 10 out of 10. The bike still looks fantastic after 2 years of pretty intensive usage. Another thing I mentioned in that video, which I still really appreciate again, is the low seat height on the Meteor. It really does make manoeuvring the bike around in the garage, at home, in the garden, without starting the engine up, just makes manoeuvring the bike around very easy, as you can see here. I find the ergonomics of the Meteor absolutely spot on for my body shape. I'm about 5'7", 5'8", with a 30-inch inside leg, and I'm supremely comfortable on this bike. I think the ergonomics are absolutely spot on, out of this world for me. Such a comfortable ride. The touring seat's still holding up well. I can do 2 to 3 hours in the saddle without stopping before the real serious discomfort starts, and I think that's more than long enough for the kind of stints most people would do. The standard seat was actually very good in that regard as well, just that the touring seat does slightly better. The longer you're in the saddle, the more you notice that it is actually offering more support. As you can see here, at some point I did remove the tinted fly screen that was fitted to Buddy, mainly because I discovered that it was actually creating turbulence which was affecting the audio in my recordings. So basically I took it off for YouTube reasons. I did like the look of it, but I still have it in the garage, but I did remove it because I felt it was causing additional turbulence. Another change I've made to the Meteor is I fitted the bar end mirrors. In that previous video I was still running the original OEM mirrors. I love these bar end mirrors, they're absolutely fantastic. They give such a steady, vibration free and large view rearwards on both sides. I can see perfectly clearly what's going on behind me. I highly recommend these bar end mirrors. They're finished to a very high standard and they look absolutely brilliant on the bike, and they're a major safety plus because they don't vibrate. The original mirrors did vibrate a lot, and we'll get back to that. So it was quite often hard to see what was going on behind you, particularly at night. These bar end mirrors are probably one of the best mods you can do to a Meteor. I absolutely love them, and actually I wish I'd got them earlier. As regular viewers of the channel will know, normally Buddy does have his panniers, as I mentioned earlier. I have some hard case panniers which I've managed to mod to fit Buddy. They're currently off the bike, as I said, because he's just had a 24-month service done, and I take the panniers off just to make the mechanic's life a little bit easier. Now, interestingly, in that first review at 3,500 kilometers, I did have two things that irked me about Buddy, and you'll be happy to hear that actually, as time has passed, those two things have resolved themselves. They no longer bother me, and I'll explain just a little bit what I mean. Well, the first thing I wasn't happy with at the time was that I was getting rusting on the inside of the silencer. So it was going orange on the inside. Now, I was asked at the time in the comments, do you do short trips on the bike? And I answered no, because I don't. I mean, when I get the bike out, I go for a ride. And it's usually quite a long ride. So no, I don't do short rides. But over time, I did notice that actually what was happening was that I was actually starting the bike to get it down from the top garage down to my house, because it's quite a loose surface and it's pretty hard to manhandle the bike. So I always started the engine, rode the bike down to the house, switched it off, went indoors, got my gear on, and then I went for a long ride. And I discovered that one time when I returned to the bike, there was actually a pool of water under the exhaust. And that is basically what was causing this oxidization inside the silencer pipe. Was just that I was firing the bike up to ride it down to the house and then shutting it off, and condensation was building in the exhaust pipe because it wasn't hot enough to burn it away. So of course the untreated steel on the inside was starting to rust. Since I've discovered that was the issue, it hasn't got any worse. I just put a little bit of WD-40 on a rag and wipe around, and it comes up nicely, and I just avoid starting the bike and stopping it for a very short period. I now actually do push the bike manually down from the garage to my house. So far I haven't dropped it, so that is possible. So that's a non-issue actually. That was my fault. I didn't realise that starting it to ride it down the house would cause that much condensation, but it does. So that's something to be aware of. Try and make sure when you do start the engine, you get the bike nice and hot, so that any condensation that does build in the silencer can just burn off, evaporate straight away, and then you won't get that orange rusting look in the rear silencer. So the silencer rust issue is a non-issue. It was basically my fault, and I've got a workaround for that now, so it doesn't bother me at all. The silencer's holding up well and it still looks decent. The other thing that I criticised at the time was the state of the Tripper app rendered the Tripper pod more or less useless, because at the time the app was terrible. Every time you'd lose reception, the navigation would just stop, the app would freeze up, you'd have to restart everything, reconnect to the pod, put your route in again, restart the route every time you just briefly lost signal. So that was a total nightmare. It would also need completely resetting, restarting every time you switched the bike off to take a break or to buy fuel. So again, that just wasn't practical, and it was just terrible. Well, fortunately last year there was a big iOS app update for Tripper, and since then it's absolutely spot on. It just resumes the route when you've stopped for a break. You just fire the bike up, it reconnects everything, it starts the navigation automatically where you left off. And if you do lose signal while you're riding, it just reconnects when it can and continues the navigation. You don't have to touch it, it just works the way it was intended to work. It's spot on now. So the criticism of the tripper that I had back then has now gone away, because the app does what it's supposed to do. So the tripper has now become a useful accessory. I wouldn't say it's a must-have, because most of us can mount a phone to the bars and use Google Maps, but it's a nice thing to have. And yeah, the criticism that I had of it has now been allayed by that recent app update. So there we go. So my two criticisms when the bike was 5 months old have both been allayed. Those issues have gone. So I suppose the next question is, well, in the 17 months after that, 18 months after that, have you had any new issues? Well, yeah, unfortunately we did have one issue, which again regular viewers of the channel will know about. I did have an issue with the OEM mirrors, and that did kind of force me into getting the bar end mirrors in the end. So I had an unusual problem, and I've not heard of anyone that's had this issue, but actually on my bike the ends of the bar end mirrors vibrated so much that they cracked, and the mirror ends actually fell off the arms. Royal Enfield don't cover mirrors under warranty. I'm guessing because there's glass, they don't cover things that have glass in them. So I did have a problem there, but the dealer very kindly bought a pair of mirrors for me and fitted them free of charge. But this whole experience kind of gave me the impetus to just go ahead and buy the bar end mirrors anyway. So I bought the bar end mirrors, and I'm glad that I have them. The issue with my mirrors, I think, really was pretty much exclusive to my bike. You have to bear in mind that my bike was actually one of the very first ones to land in Europe of this new model, the Meteor at the time. And we were in the midst of a global supply crisis. And I have a suspicion that Royal Enfield were just getting mirrors from wherever they could to get these bikes finished and get them shipped off. Because the mirrors that were on there, they had no Royal Enfield markings at all, which normally those types of mirrors did have Royal Enfield embossed into the backs of them. So these were kind of no-name mirrors. So I suspect that they were mirrors that they bought in from somewhere in an emergency just to get these early bikes finished. I've not heard of anyone else having the same issue, so it's not something anyone should really be worrying about. And as I said, really, just get the bar end mirrors anyway. They look better, they give you a much better view. Yeah, don't mess about, just get some nice bar end mirrors, unless you don't like them, but I think they look absolutely spot on. So there we go. So all of the problems really have turned out to be not major problems, and I've ended up having the bike better as a result, with the bar end mirrors and the exhaust problem being solved. So really, is there anything I'd like to change about this bike? Well, yeah, there's only one thing, and there's one thing that I would like to change about this bike. I would like to improve the rear suspension. I would like to do a spring damper unit upgrade of some sort. People out there are having quite good results with the Classic 500 shocks from Endurance, the company Endurance. They seem to provide a 30% increase in rear comfort. So that's something I will be looking into. That is literally the only thing on this bike that can be a nuisance, is that the quality of the spring damper units is not great. The initial part of the spring still seems quite stiff to me, so you don't get a lot of give in the suspension. And because of where you're sitting, basically with your spine just above the top mount of the spring damper unit, impacts through the tyre do tend to go straight up your back. It's not such a problem for me, which is why after 2 years I still haven't got around to changing them, because over here the roads tend to be pretty good, pretty smooth. But I imagine if you lived somewhere where the roads had a lot of repair patches, a lot of potholes, the rear suspension on the Meteor would very quickly get on your nerves, and you'd be looking to fit something that's a bit more plush, just to protect your spine a little bit more on poor road surfaces. So that's the only thing I would really change from the bike as it is now, and that's something I may get around to doing this year, just depends. But yeah, the rear suspension isn't the best, and it's definitely something a lot of people are looking to improve and upgrade. So there you go. As you can probably tell, after 2 years I still love Buddy. I still think he's fantastic. I'm going to head off home now. You can come along for the ride, and on the way home I'm going to collect my thoughts and I'll give you my final conclusions when I get home in the form of a little voiceover. So, let's go. So, as I ride home, I will give you my conclusions. After 2 years of owning and running this bike, it still puts a smile on my face every time I go out on it. I do absolutely love this bike. Riding a straight road at 55 miles per hour is a delight. At that speed, the engine just purrs along and it feels as though it's not stressed at all. Similarly, the handling is good enough that you can also enjoy this bike on a twisty mountain road, keeping up with faster, more powerful bikes. The Meteor is so easy to ride, and the OEM tyres and the handling quickly inspire confidence. But really, easy cruising is where this bike is in its element. If you ride it in the right way, shifting up through the gears nice and quickly, it really is such a relaxed cruiser. It's so enjoyable to shift up early with the wonderful heel-toe shifter, and then set it into a nice purring 4th or 5th gear cruise on your favourite road. For me, the Meteor is much more than the sum of its parts. It has a real soul to it. It has a way of making you relax and enjoy every ride. This, for me, is what makes it such a very special bike. I was never a cruiser guy. I bought the Meteor because I liked how it looked in the launch photos, and also because I could actually afford to go out and buy one. It could have all ended in total disaster. Back then, when I bought Buddy, there was no way to get a test ride. I just bought him because visually and financially he appealed to me. I just kept everything crossed that I would get on with him. After more than 2 years, I can honestly say that this bike has already delivered way beyond my wildest expectations. I've loved this bike since the very first ride, and after over 2 years of ownership, that love has not diminished. Today, I am so glad that back in June 2021, I took the plunge and bought this motorcycle. Overall, this is probably the best motorcycle I've ever owned. Not in any one regard, but overall. There are plenty of areas where other bikes I've owned were better than this one, of course, but as a package, as a motorcycle you buy to take out and enjoy on the weekends, to accompany you in your motorcycling hobby, I really don't think I've ever had a bike which fitted that brief as well as this one. The Royal Enfield Meteor 350 is such a great bike, and it's also great value. This is one heck of a motorcycle for the price you pay. So would I recommend it to anyone considering buying one? Yes, absolutely I would. In fact, I would even recommend it to people who haven't considered buying one. I think this bike would surprise a lot of people if they actually gave it a fair chance. For me, the Meteor delivers the pure essence of what it is that I enjoy most about motorcycling, every single time I take it out. In over 2 years, my ownership experience so far has been very economical, completely hassle-free, well, aside from the OEM mirror issue, and full of wonderful, relaxing rides. So thank you for a wonderful 2 years, buddy, and here's to many more. And thank you, Royal Enfield, for whatever it is you put into these bikes to make them so special. I know that was quite a long-winded conclusion. If I had to sum up my time with the Royal Enfield Meteor 350 in 2 words, it would be, you guessed it, spot on. So I hope I didn't get you too drunk with this video, and thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video here on my Economical Rides YouTube channel. Now I believe we're going over to Ruby for some sausage action. So Ruby, Daddy's had his Meteor 350 for over 2 years now. What's that? How much is 2 years in dog years? I think it's 14 dog years. Yes, that is a long time, isn't it? Are you tired? You decided to lay down? Anyway, Ruby, enough about Meteor 350s. You looked after the house for Daddy, so now it's time for sausages. Yes, it's time for sausages. Today's sausages are kindly donated by your friend Shad Lake. Thank you, Shad Lake. Sausages. Nice one. Thanks, Shad Lake. Got any more? Sausages. Nice one. Thanks.